Hey everyone, Skylar Williamson here. Appreciate you all tuning in to this webinar we're going to do on estate planning. I got Alan Apple here, who owns his own law firm and is an expert in this. And I'm going to let him introduce himself here a bit. But we're excited to bring this content to you. Hopefully we can get in and out of this information pretty quick, so that you get the meat of the subject and you have an idea of why it's important and what to go do for these next steps. And we don't take too much of your time. I do have a few slides that I'd like to cover, just on future events and just the purpose of Corporate Battlefield in general. All right, so we have a great event coming up in October. Has some fantastic speakers. This is the first event that I'm actually going to charge for, and use the word charge lightly. It's a suggested dollar amount. Every dollar that we make, we're going to give to teachers in financial need. So we're not pocketing any of this, and even our speakers, we're incredible human beings, and are working with us to deliver their talks at the lowest possible rate that they can, so that we can give as much money to our speakers. So don't let the $100 hold you back. If you want to come to the event, just give us a call, register. We'll figure out a way to get you in there. It's more important to me that we get people to the event and raise any money that we can for the teachers than it's a hard and fast $100. So just please do reach out to us if you need some help, and we'll help you out there. All right, the Corporate Battlefield. I just want to remind everybody why we have this organization, why we do it every month, beyond just first thing is, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you're an expert in what we're about to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. And so my name is Alan Apple. I'm the founder of Apple Law, and it's a law firm I started to help essentially businesses do business with the federal government, and also give them the strategic business counsel on how to do business with government. Within that, and in my prior life as a judge advocate, I had practiced procurement law, but I'd also done a little bit of estate planning on the very front side of it, to help folks get where they need to be as far as their estate goes. But more recently, I have really kind of tied that into my experiences working with businesses and business owners that are going through the startup continuum. Everybody kind of goes through the same little piece or stretch when they start a business, is that they're all optimistic. They got everything that they think that to set up an entity and all that sort of stuff. And inevitably, a larger percentage of them than you think are very successful very quickly. And then they're worried about, how it is they're going to, exit, so how they're going to monetize that sort of thing. And that's a great problem to have, but it helps if you kind of plan for things all the way through it. And estate planning certainly plays an important role in that for the business and the family and all the way through it. And so, I certainly have seen that in my private practice. But before that, I got a little bit of tie to the battlefield, I guess, just a bit in that, I'm a retired judge advocate, finished as a chair of contract and fiscal law for the Army JAG School, and had been given advice and counsel to commanders, both deployed and in the rear for quite some time. And so I've always enjoyed that piece of it. I like, and so there's like some commonality between that characteristic of giving advice and counsel, and especially procurement law matters to commanders, and this, and that it's an area that a lot of people aren't that familiar with, right? They don't really know. They've maybe heard of it, but they don't know a lot of the mechanics or the details of it, what the consequences are from it, and they rely on somebody pretty heavily to kind of put them in the right space, or at least to inform them so they can make really good decisions about what they want to actually achieve their goals. And so, I was fortunate enough and honored enough to do it, certainly deployed, but now that I'm out of the military and I'm doing it for small business, that same level of gratification is there, because there is just nothing better than the feeling you get when you help somebody do what it is that they want to do, help them finish a little bit.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So estate planning, give me the basic definition that you would have for estate planning. If someone just walked up to you, or like if you were talking to your kids, how would you explain it to them?
Well, when my daughters ask me, what is estate planning?
All right.
I tell them, I take it down to the lowest level, and they're now college graduates, and so, but they'll ask me, and they'll say, what exactly is that? Especially with a lot of the legal concepts that are involved and various other things. I say that estate planning is all about the preparation for the transfer of assets and to a beneficiary at the right time. And so I say that at a very high level because that's what it is all about. And there are different tools and mechanisms you use to actually effectuate that. But that's what estate planning is. And one of the most interesting things about it is that you do it whether you know it or not, right? Yeah. And so I like to think of estate planning as a purposeful, planned, preparation thing that you do as you go through life at certain intervals. You create a will at some point, certainly before deployment, Skylar, you can probably remember all this. You go through pre-deployment training, and they run you through a legal station. They put you through, you do a will, maybe a testamentary trust or something like that, but they get you ready to go, right? And so you do a level of it. Well, when you're prepared to do something, you usually fare a lot better than you would otherwise. But it's those situations where folks don't do it, that guess what? The state will do it for you. And so it's kind of like, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a will or anything else like that, the state actually has the intestate statute that talks about, how they're going to divide your assets, what's going to happen to them, and how they would proceed. And so we'll probably talk more about that a little bit later. But if you don't plan, that's making a plan to let the state take care of it. If you do plan and you do actively take care of it on the front end, then you have some control over what's going on protecting wealth, distributing it the way you want it to go, and also, probably doing it with a level of privacy and certainty that you don't otherwise get.
Yeah. And I think, this may not be 100% accurate when you're younger, but certainly as you build your wealth, it'll be least expensive route of distributing your wealth too, because if the state gets involved, it could end up being much more expensive than this, upfront plan that we go and hire someone to help us with.
There's no doubt about it. I like to look at cost in two different ways. Cost financially, there's a dollar amount next to it, and there's no doubt that planning for it up front saves you money and it puts your assets where they're supposed to be and stuff like that. But there's another cost that's involved, and it's not monetary. It is a stress that's involved, with your family in dealing with assets. And so it gets profoundly more difficult for folks that are successsul if they don't have a plan up front for their families to kind of deal with that stuff if there isn't a plan, because you have to deal with what is your entire estate. So what is that? That's all your assets, and it's all your bank accounts, all your brokerage accounts, all your real estate, all your businesses that you have stock ownership in, all your single member LLC, all that business interests that you have and all that sort of stuff. Well, if you're not planning for it up front, then your family's planning for it. They're paying for it in a lot of ways because they have to deal with how it is you're going to distribute that sort of stuff. And it might be through the probate process, through a will and all that other
Yeah.
all that mechanism. But unfortunately in life, I've seen a certain amount of tragedy.
Yeah.
Just like everybody does. They have their difficulties, laughs, ups and downs.
Yeah.
But the older I get, the more I think, I just would not want that to happen, to my wife, or unfortunately, I was telling you a story about my dad, where it did kind of happen to me with him, in that he didn't want to participate in that sort of stuff. So I ended up doing
Yeah.
his estate. But
Yeah.
there's two ways to do it. So financially, yeah, it's absolutely a lot cheaper up front, and you can actually purposely, and depending on what your assets are and stuff like that, you can save on estate taxes if that's an issue with you. You can protect from outside conflict, contest the will and various things like that, and sometimes creditors, once if you go the right route in your estate plan.
Yep. So you mentioned how it gets more complex with the more success that you have, but is there a defining moment in someone's life where they should go and do this for the first time, or what is the timing of it? When should somebody do this and I'll say more than just thinking about it themselves? When should they connect with a professional to have that conversation?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I get asked that pretty regularly, actually. When should I do it? And it kind of is a circular area, and in that when I actually talk to people about it, they say, well, I didn't think I wanted to talk to anybody because I didn't have enough assets, and I wasn't sure of actually when to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so, it's a good idea to take care of it. I mean, as soon as you're an adult and you're working independently, to start thinking about an estate plan, because estate planning is kind of a global term that covers how you're going to transfer assets, who's going to get them, and the timing of it, And it might be something that a simple will can take care of at one point, and maybe that's adequate and perfect for you at one stage of life. But as you go through life, inevitably there's some success out there, especially with, especially with veterans and a lot of the demographics that we hang out with. There's success in their future, and these life changes have significant impacts on, what that estate entails, and or the way that they would want to distribute it. So.
Yep. So I want to just kind of list out what are the deliverables. So you've mentioned a will, you've mentioned the trust, but what are if I'm thinking through estate planning process and I have maybe a checklist, like what would be the deliverables, wealth on one side, but some of the other things that maybe people don't like medical attorney or power of attorney, things like that. What are some of those deliverables there?
Yeah. And so, I'll preface with every client in every situation, the deliverables are a little bit different, meaning that, everybody that comes, certainly that I have as clients, or that I consider that will be clients, or that we talk about this particular subject, their situation is different than everybody else. And I have never seen two that had the identical ultimate plan and deliverables. There's always been, there are some commonalities, certainly, but they're always a little bit different, whether it's preferences, whether it's, the assets that they have, or what they want to do with it, how they want to dispose, all that sort of stuff. It varies a little bit, which is one of the reasons why, so there are different approaches to estate planning. The way I like to handle estate planning, especially early on, is go through a family wealth planning session that, kind of looks at those assets and enters into a real dialogue of, hey, this is what you have, this is what you want to do. And then, how you would ultimately do it because of that kind of variance there. But within that, I mean, obviously you're going to have some documents that help you get the outcome that you want. And I slow down on that and say it that way, because documents are important, but they're not the end all. If they're done right and they have the right context and they're done in the right way, then they can get you the outcome you want. But, as a person doing estate planning, you want the outcome. You don't want the document, because you can get a document that says trust or estate or power of attorney, or, the question is, okay, well, is it valid? Does it do what it is that you think it ought to do, or you want it to do? And so the answer to that a lot of times is maybe. It depends on, who did it and where it's from and what the intent was, certainly.
Yep. Well, we said the two key ones. So tell me, just again, and like you would with your daughter, what does a will do for you?
What is will? Well, a will is a legal instrument that actually transfers assets upon death. There's a probate process where you probate the will and you publish it for everybody to see. You have an executor identified in it, or if not, one is attached to it, that allows that person to go ahead and execute the terms of that will, or, if they died intestate, they execute the terms of the estate, and to transfer property to whoever it should go to. And so, somebody, once they die, they can't own property. So all that property, all the debts, all the assets have to be transferred to somebody else or something else. And so a will is one of the ways to do that.
Yep. And is that usually the first place someone starts?
Oh, easily. It's one of the easiest things that you can do, and one of the first places people start, because they always have heard of wills. That's the way to go. And if you don't have a lot of assets and things like that, and you're just not sure, having an instrument in place that you've constructed that actually that documents your wishes the way you want it to is much better than just letting the state do it, right? Sometimes that works and it does exactly what you want anyway, but oftentimes, and almost 90% of the time, that's not the case.
Yeah. And I know when I went through the process, there was like a questionnaire that I filled out.
Yep.
Are there some things that I should have prepared before I go and sit down with an attorney, just that I could just have already thought about it, or maybe I have a spouse, I could talk with them about it before we go have that first meeting?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
What are some of those questions?
Absolutely. And so, as far as for my system, I can speak, with particularity about, I have folks do some homework. I have them do some homework so that first meeting is really a working session. So it's beneficial to both of us. The homework is pretty, invasive in a way, because it makes you think about assets a little bit differently than you had before, because it's asking you specific things about, okay, what do you have? Where do you have it? What do you have? What's about the amount of it? What would you want in this certain circumstance? If you needed to have a guardian, you have kids, and it was going to be permanent or ongoing, who would it be? If it was an interim situation where you just needed somebody to take custody for them for a couple of hours because, Alan and Jennifer's my wife, died in a car wreck on the way there. What happens to the kids in the interim? You don't want them to go to protected custody. You want them to go to neighbor, but people need to know and being able to identify that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, you certainly have all those aspects.
Yep. Yeah, I remember. I think when I was younger, there was like one person that could do a lot of things for me. Now, the older we just understand that people have niche expertise. So the ones that might be best to raise our kids are not the best ones to manage our money for the kids.
Yeah.
And that person's certainly not the best person to raise the kids. So it's, I think by going through the process myself, and certainly I know you would coach people through it too, but you can make it as detailed and as specific as you want. And in fact, maybe you should think of it that way. Like how granular could I get with the instruction?
I think it's helpful. If you're in business, then you appreciate how businesses work, how assets work, how assets transfer, how you might sell that business somewhere, how that reflects in an estate plan. Well, what is an estate plan, and what would that entail? What kind of level of detail do you need in it, and why do you need it? A lot of these concepts, and certainly a lot of the terms are interchangeable, not necessarily interchangeable, but related in such a way that it helps you with a greater context and understanding of, how business works or how assets work, and so believe it or not, Skylar, in Texas, there's $7 billion of unclaimed property out there, $7 billion, right? Wow. And it's through property that's not transferred because people, the incomplete transfer, or maybe they didn't know what to do with the asset, or whatever reason. It's unclaimed, $7 billion. Yeah. Nationally, it's $70 billion, right? And so there's at least that much out there that should have been transferred to somebody else, something else, that just wasn't at the time. And if you take care of it, you won't be a percentage of that, most likely. But if you don't plan for it, if you don't think about it a little bit, then you could let something like that happen. And that's just a travesty.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say this too, just being completely vulnerable. married couple, it forces you to talk about what you have too. Because, I've got complete trust from Kristen. And there are some decisions that I make, opportunities that we pursue that we talk about quickly, but there's not often not a follow-up discussion with like, okay, well, this is how it really settled out, and this is where that investment lies, and this is how you would find it. It's having a list of everything that you have in case something happened to the person that is the one of the couple that keeps everything together. Having that conversation forced on you is a great one to have too.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
I mean,
trust. What is the trust? Oh, go. You had something to say on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you hit the nail on the head, and it's one of the reasons why I require that sort of homework in the front, in the beginning, because that, in a lot of ways, depending on who you're working with, is the hardest thing to do. Finding out what you've got, where it is, and how you access it. Especially if you have like some sort of compartmentalization or bifurcation of assets where, one spouse or one person decides to be, they're kind of in charge of the checkbook, so I don't think about it all. Yeah, I make money, but they kind of take care of this element of it. Or he does the investments, investments. He's in, and so once you have that, if you lose that element or that knowledge, and it's not written down anywhere, it's not available to the other person, it can become profoundly difficult to actually do anything. Even if you're just, if you didn't have a will or anything else like that, well, you go through probate, what do you have to do? Well, you have to identify what the assets are and where they're going. You have to tell the judge, you have to do all that sort of stuff. And, and I can tell you, it is, I mean, I might have mentioned this and, when we were having lunch a month ago, but my dad was terrible at it. I ended up being an executor for his estate, and he was terrible at it. He was hiding information from me actively, I think, maybe. But you got to figure out, where the accounts were, where his safe deposit deposit box was, where the key was, to get to everything, and just, he didn't tell me that stuff. He didn't do all the things that I wanted him to do, but that was my dad. So you have to visualize in the way I do, right? So 6'3", 300 pounds, looks like me, just uglier, right? And so, you're not getting in his business. He's running 35 head of Longhorn cows and, that sort of thing. And so deal with the wide swath that he's going to cut through an area. And so when he passed on, that was one of the biggest challenges. And so I like to look at it like, I am as totally equipped and prepared as anybody on the planet to deal with that stuff. I do government contracts. I do estate planning and stuff like that. I'm an attorney. I should be ready to go. Well, it was hard. I mean, I'm going to tell you, even a probate-friendly state, it was hard to do, and it took me a long time to do because I was finding assets. And, even, for instance, like 13 months into it, he had an asset that I got a notice from mail forwarding. I didn't know he had. And I thought, well, no, wasn't the only one, but it was just like, oh, that's difficult. So you're absolutely right. That is probably the most important thing and why you want to get into that sort of detail,
Yeah. And, how often should you relook this document?
Oh, I like doing it after every milestone, every major life decision that you have, adding new kids, adding a business, adding a significant asset, investment, at least kind of thinking about it. I do for clients look at estate plans every 3 years. And so, I end up looking at it, considering any changes in law and all that sort of stuff. But having the family look at it and saying, okay, yeah, I really have this thing. I forgot all that was in there. This is really important. Maybe I want to change a little bit. Oh my gosh, I did kind of announce this person to be an executor or a trustee or a guardian, and that's not a good choice anymore. I need to do this, or, I don't want this going to, it's always a good idea because life, you have your life changes and challenges as you go through. And so if you don't change it, you'll be in my situation. So with my dad, I was like, I was looking at a holographic will, which is a handwritten will, cursive, one page, written 40 years ago. And it was right before my mom had passed away. And so, it didn't really it didn't help much, other than just generally.
Yeah. Okay. What about trust? Why would we start to think about a trust? When would we start to think about a trust? And what is the basics of what a trust is?
Yeah. So what is a trust? Well, it's a type of property division where you have three parties involved, or three categories of people involved. You have the grantor, the testator that sends assets to the trust. You have the trustee, who's a fiduciary to the trust, that executes the terms and conditions of the trust and carries out wishes there. And then, of course, you have the beneficiary to the trust. And so, each one of those groups of people, or that people, end up playing a role in the process. But certainly, trusts are a favored instrument to use in estate planning to do several things. First is to kind of remove the asset transfer from conflict. It kind of takes you out of probate more often than not. It takes you out of probate, so you don't have to worry about going in front of a judge and going through the probate process. Which, and I didn't really mention the timing of it. To probate a will in Texas, probably is going to take, depending on the complexity of the assets and stuff like that, anywhere from 6 to 18 months. More often than not, it would be more than that. It'd be about 12 to 18, somewhere in there, to actually close it out and do all the things you need to do. It takes a long period of time to do it. A trust is a little bit different in that you have your grantor to the trust, the person that sets it up and actually funds the trust, that puts assets in it. The trust exists, and so it's there. It has assets to it and things like that. And the trustee is the person that actually executes the terms and conditions of the trust, or lives within it. And sometimes the trustee can be the beneficiary of it as well. And so you hear that a lot in the revocable living trust now, that a lot of people set up in estate planning. And it can be, a great situation for folks, in that you take your property, you put it in a trust. You don't have to go through probate. You keep everything relatively private, and you set it up such that there won't be much conflict. But most of the time, you don't get a contest to a trust instrument. It's just a contract, and you have a contract for this fiduciary to do certain things with your trust, which they inevitably do.
Yeah. I mean, real quick, just because you brought it up, why would I use an irrevocable trust versus a revocable trust?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people like to talk about trust globally, right? And so a revocable trust is one where you can revoke it. You can revoke the trust itself, and you have access to it, to all its assets. You can direct it to wherever you want it to go for a revocable trust. So the amount of protection of those assets is less than you would have in a irrevocable trust. In an irrevocable trust, when a grantor transfers assets to it, it goes into a trust that you cannot revoke. It's going to be there for the purposes that it's intended. And depending on what those things are, sometimes it's set up for the health, education, maintenance of maybe the grantor, and so there's a limited areas that they can access to it, or maybe it's somebody else, or whatever the purpose is. But it's limited. And so, a creditor that's trying to get assets from you because of a lawsuit or something like that can't really get to, most of the time, they can't really get to the assets of a trust, or it does add a layer of protection that isn't otherwise there.
Yeah. I guess on that point, assuming you had an irrevocable trust set up, I have it set up for my children. That how do you make the decision on what assets to put in that trust versus ones that you keep outside of it?
Yeah, and so a lot of what you end up doing is you start looking at their situation, and everybody's situation is a little bit different in that, the amount of assets that are coming through, it might be that you're setting up a credit shelter trust, or maybe a disclaimer trust that allows you to disclaim some of the stuff, put it into a trust to avoid some of the estate taxes that are there. And maybe that's an irrevocable trust. And it's available for dependents that are beneath it, or that would ultimately be the beneficiaries of it.
Okay. I've made the decision to go set up my will and trust. If I end up doing both, outside of just myself, is there anyone else I should bring along with me if I have professionals for financial advising, tax accountant, anybody else that I should bring with us?
Well, I don't know that you're going to bring them to the meeting, but you're going to connect, several parties, because this, depending on how big your estate is, you might have several people that have specialized information that's going to be very helpful to anybody setting up the trust. If you have an attorney doing it, a lot of attorneys like to have a tax advisor that's involved with it. That's huge. If it, certainly, sometimes it's a real estate agent that's involved with it, or an insurance agent that's involved with it, or certainly, a CPA that kind of opines on some of the tax consequences for setting up a trust. Because once you actually set up a trust and you put assets in it, sometimes there are tax consequences both at the state and federal level.
Mm-hmm. Let's say my kids grow up and they move to another state. Any reason to address different state laws with the trust, or just keep the trust where you live and just play by those rules?
Yeah. And so, get that question a lot, especially as people travel more and there's, and really you want to talk to whoever's your, estate planner and about that a little bit, just because, the trust itself is a contractual instrument. And so it's going to be valid wherever you go. Now, the jurisdictional law that applies to it might change depending on where your assets are, where's the status of administration, and things like that. And so, if all your stuff is in Texas and you're in Texas and all of a sudden you move outside of Texas and you're really going to administer, or whoever's going to administer your trust, if the trustee lives, outside of Texas, it could be that entire trust is going to be, administered by, Virginia law or, Delaware law or something like that. You definitely want to look into it a little bit to find out, well, what's the catalyst that does that? Is it the status of administration, or, has it been designated within the trust document that, hey, we're just going to use this law to be able to grapple with it? And it's not going to invalidate your trust, but it may affect, certainly, and it may affect the tax consequences significantly just because of where you are and where it has to be administered. Yep.
Okay. All right. Let's just assume I'm a basic case. Okay. Married. I have children. Let's assume I have some retirement accounts. I have my primary residence and maybe one rental property. From a budgeting standpoint, what budget do I need to think in my head? I need to have saved up to go make this investment in the future here, at least for this first start of it.
Right. And so, the scenario you gave me is a little bit more advanced than the real startup. I mean, the people, okay, you need to think about it as you're coming through, newlywed, no kids, right? You need to, at step one, at stage one, think about that. And so, I don't exaggerate or do any saber rattling when I say that, just because, things happen that are outside of your control. And the thing that you want to do is take care of that significant other, whoever it is. And maybe the state and testate laws do that in such a way that you're not worried about it. But you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know until you talk to somebody and say, well, we have this. I mean, even in the military, Skylar, I mean, you had people coming in with sizable estates into the military. And then they would add to that estate, death benefits and stuff like that they get automatically in there that put them over, $1 million in assets. And they would think, well, I don't have any money. No, guess what? You got some assets that are considered in your estate that you want to definitely consider. And if you don't contemplate that early on, even when you're single or early married and stuff like that, then you kind of suffer the consequences from that. But I would say even from a higher level, it's great. It's great education, because I don't know about you, but when I came through college, I had a pretty good book smart. I kind of knew exactly what the book answer was, but how to do things and the consequences of them, it didn't always occur to me. And so talking to somebody about, okay, well, how does this work with that? And just like your question, how does this work with that? That kind of context and ability to be able to have that feedback from somebody just helps them, be able to build to the next step. And so inevitably, if they're going to be a business owner or something like that, or they'll be an entrepreneur, in several business ventures, it just helps them with the, context all the way through.
Okay. Well, all right. So let's assume that then. Let's do that.
Yep.
Married
Going back to
couple,
your
no
question
children. Yeah.
about cost, really, right?
Yeah.
So cost for one of those other ones is not that much. It could be $1,000, or less. Depending on who's doing it, and why, and all that sort of stuff. But on the example that you gave, you got, a married couple, you got a couple of kids, you got some retirement accounts, some insurance, maybe bought the first house and all that. Usually the price range, it varies because of what they might want to do, but it's, anywhere between $2,000 and $8,000. And so, it could be anywhere in there. Most of the time it's way down at the bottom end, but I do give a range just because, like I said, everybody's different. It could be, and so, in past practices, it could be that, hey, they have some family money. As a matter of fact, they have their own trust they're the beneficiary of that you have to consider, and they want to, this is going to be happening. And so they're not just setting up, a living trust with, or a will with a testamentary trust or something like that. They're thinking, okay, well, that estate, we're going to have to set up multiple trusts. It's not just a survivor trust and a marriage trust. It's 3 other trusts that, guess what? In each segment of it, you're going to have 3 trusts that are below it, to be able to compensate for, so the level of complexity kind of adds to that.
Yep. Understandable. Okay. What have I not asked that you think I should have, and then deliver the answer on that question?
Yeah. And so, the thing everybody forgets, Scott, they think about the hard and fast. Okay, I want to move, X dollars from this bank account to somebody, in the will and trust deal. And they think about the monetary piece of it. That's important. And you have to take care of that. That's like blocking and tackling in football. You have to do it to win. You have to do it. The things that I remember and the things that I think that are super important that you will remember forever are those things that would go into a letter of instruction or that are added as a legacy interview and stuff like that. That is critical because more often than not, if you have an estate plan and, and unfortunately, you die young or something like that, your kids, your wife or whatever, they're going to want those things that surround that. And it might be they're making decisions on how you're going to be buried and what music you're going to have and what, religion you're going to have. And all that is super important, super important. They want to know that and they want to get it right. And if you don't tell them, then they're always worried about it. They're just picking out what you think they would want to have. But even beyond that, the legacy interview that I like to do with folks, has them talk to you a little bit, and especially, early on with some of the younger couples, it becomes such more, I'm not around for you, but this is important to me. These are my values. This is what I think of. This is all important. I mean, there's a reason why, Skylar, on my phone right now, I have a message from my dad, died 4 years ago. He used to call me up, leave the shortest message ever. Here's my birthday, May 28, 2020. Hey, Alan, this is your dad. Happy birthday. I wanted to call you at 6 so I could wake you up. I couldn't do it. That's what it is, right? That's what it is. I couldn't live without that, right? I couldn't live without some of the stuff. That kind of information is stuff you want to pass as well. And so, even if they go into the estate planning piece of it, they'll get that. They'll get that stuff, right? And you'll get it right. Whatever attorney you use, you're going to get all that. I hope, right. That added piece is probably the most valuable piece because that's what you remember. Money will come and go. You'll use it and it will be for whatever purpose. But that other stuff is super important, and you'll be glad you did.
All right. And so letter of instruction and the legacy interview.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. I like it. All right. Well, hey, someone watches this video and they want to get in touch with you. How would they get in touch with you?
So I have a website, of course, applelaw.us, which, my contact information is on there. You can certainly call me at, I don't know, are you releasing my number? Do you mind if I give it?
Yeah, give it. Yeah. I mean,
512-962-9955. That's my cell.
Yep.
So you'll be calling me directly. I have no problem with that. I like to be available for folks, and I like to help folks.
Great. Well, I appreciate you. We're grateful for this information. And for those of you that kind of connect with us monthly, Corporate Battlefield, our next event is in October. We'd love to see you there. If you got value from this webinar, then I would encourage you to please donate, $5, $10, $15. to our corporate battlefield account. And again, all this money we give to teachers in financial need. So we hope that you share some of the blessings you have, and we can bless those with it. Looks like we have maybe one question. I'm just gonna. Can you see it, Alan, or do I need to read it out? Yeah, let me read it out. How do you access your assets at death with a trust, like an insurance policy? Does the trustee do it or the beneficiary?
So with an insurance policy, it's kind of outside of the trust unless you have the beneficiary named in the trust as the trust, meaning that normally with the insurance policy, you have it going to a person. And if you're married, it's probably going to your wife or your mother and dad, or whoever it's going to. You have a beneficiary named. It's not technically an asset yet, and so it is actually outside of the trust. You can actually have that insurance policy beneficiary be your trust, and so certainly all those funds can go to your trust. And there's a lot of folks that actually do that. I certainly set up things to go that way so that it automatically gets paid to the trust, and whoever's your trustee can determine where that money goes and for what the benefit is, whatever the terms of the trust directs them to.
Excellent. Any other questions? All right, now we're going to wrap up. They know how to find you. If you can't find them online, then you can find me, and I'll point you to them. But I appreciate all you guys tuning in, and looking forward to the next one. Thanks, Al.
Great. Thank you.
I'm grateful, Alan.